Hello viewers, in this video I will try to give you a little insight about a travel writing book, and that book is City of Djinns, written by William Dalrymple. Before discussing the book, let's try to know about the background of this book. The book City of Djinns, A Year in Delhi, which was published in 1993. It is a travelogue written by William Dalrymple about the historical capital of India, that is Delhi, or now we can say New Delhi. It is his second book, and it uh, culminated as a consequence of his 6 years stay in New Delhi. So the writer had stayed for 6 years in Delhi to write this book. The City of Djinns is one of the first books by William Dalrymple which does not revolve around the history of India. Rather, it represents various anecdotes of his time in India, and it also explores the history of India with the help of various characters he meets, like the driver, the Puri family, the customs officer, the British survivors of the British Raj, as well as whirling dervishes and Inanches dancers, which was a strange mix of pity and bawdiness. Moreover, Dalrymple had described ancient ruins and the experience of living in the modern city. Then he goes on in search of the history behind the epic stories of the Mahabharata, and he also finds evidence of the city's violent past and present day, that is the 1857 mutiny against British rule and the partition massacres in 1947 and riots after the assassination of Indira Gandhi in 1984. Besides, the book followed his established style of historical digression, tied in with contemporary events and a multitude of anecdotes. Here, I would like to add one thing. Please read the books line by line, word by word. Do not rely on secondary sources like this. Okay, this you can read just for a little insight and nothing else. So now let's try to know about the author, William Dalrymple. He was born as William Hamilton Dalrymple on 20 March 1965. He is a Delhi-based Scottish historian and art historian, as well as he is a curator, photographer, broadcaster, and critic. He is also one of the co-founders and co-directors of the world's largest writers' festival, that is the annual Jaipur Literature Festival. His books have won numerous awards and prizes. It includes Wolfson Prize for History, the Duff Cooper Memorial Prize, the Hemingway, the Kapuscinski, sorry for the pronunciation, the Arthur Ross Medal of the U.S. Council on Foreign Relations, the Thomas Cook Travel Book Award, and the Sunday Times Young British Writer of the Year Award. So he is a man of many talents. I will not read all the things related to the writer. If you want to read, then you can read it. Means you can pause the video and then you can read. Okay. Now we will directly go to the historical importance of the story. Okay, if you want to understand the story of this book, then you must know about assassination of Indira Gandhi, how she was killed, why she was killed, and what happened after that. Indira Gandhi, she was the prime minister who was assassinated at 9:30 a.m. on 31st October 1984 at her own residence in Safdarjung Road, New Delhi. She was killed by her own bodyguards, Satwant Singh and Bean Singh, in the aftermath of Operation Blue Star, which was an Indian military action carried out between 1 and 8 June 1984, ordered by Indira Gandhi to remove Jarnail Singh Bhindranwala and his followers from the Golden Temple of Harmandir Sahib in Amritsar, Punjab. And the collateral damage, it included the death of many pilgrims as well as damage of the Akal Takht. The military action on the sacred temple was criticized both inside and outside India. And Operation Blue Star, it was a large Indian military operation carried out between 1 and 8 June 1984, as I have said earlier, ordered by Indira Gandhi, then Prime Minister, to remove leader Jarnail Singh Bhindranwala and his militant Sikh followers from the buildings of Harmandir Sahib complex in Amritsar, Punjab. The Indian Army suffered around 83 casualties with 700 injuries, and 450 to 500 Sikh rebels were killed during this operation. And the handling of the operation, damage to the holy shrine, and loss of military and civilian life on both sides led to widespread criticism of the Indian government at the time. And the perceived threat to Gandhi's life increased after the operation. Accordingly, Sikh were removed from her personal bodyguard detail by the Intelligence Bureau for fear of assassination. Gandhi thought that this would reinforce her anti-Sikh image among the public. However, she ordered to Delhi police to reinstate her Sikh bodyguards, including Ben Singh, who was reported to be her personal favorite. Over the next 4 days, it 1,006 were killed in retaliatory violence, and this thing is beautifully, magnificently, splendidly portrayed in this story. Say, City of Djinn. Okay.
The Justice Thacker Commission of Inquiry, headed by Justice Manharlal Pranlal Thacker, set up to probe Gandhi's assassination, recommended a separate probe for the conspiracy angle behind the assassination. The Thacker 3-page report stated that the needle of suspicion pointed at R.K. Dewan for complicity in the conspiracy. Satwant Singh and alleged conspirator Kehar Singh were sentenced to death. Both were executed on the 6th of January 1989. A Punjabi movie titled Kaun Dahir, Gems of the Community, highlighting the lives of the two guards that assassinated Indira Gandhi, was set to be released on the 22nd of August 2014, but was banned by the Indian government for 5 years. Indian Rebellion of 1857. The Indian Rebellion of 1857 was a major uprising in India in 1857-58 against the rule of the British East India Company, which functioned as a sovereign power on behalf of the British Crown. The rebellion began on the 10th of May 1857 in the form of a mutiny of sepoys of the company's army in the garrison town of Meerut, 40 miles 64 kilometers northeast of Delhi. It then erupted into other mutinies and civilian rebellions, chiefly in the upper Gangetic Plain in central India, though incidents of revolt also occurred farther north and east. The rebellion posed a military threat to British power in that region, and was contained only with the rebels' defeat in Gwalior on the 20th of June 1858. On the 1st of November 1858, the British granted amnesty to all rebels not involved in murder, though they did not declare the hostilities to have formally ended until the 8th of July 1859. Its name is contested, and it is variously described as the Sepoy Mutiny, the Indian Mutiny, the Great Rebellion, the Revolt of 1857, the Indian Insurrection, and the First War of Independence. Partition of India in 1947. The Partition of India in 1947 was the change of political borders and the division of other assets that accompanied the dissolution of the British Raj in South Asia and the creation of two independent dominions, India and Pakistan. The Dominion of India is today the Republic of India, and the Dominion of Pakistan, which at the time comprised two regions lying on either side of India, is now the Islamic Republic of Pakistan and the People's Republic of Bangladesh. The partition was outlined in the Indian Independence Act 1947. The change of political borders notably included the division of two provinces of British India, Bengal and Punjab. The majority Muslim districts in these provinces were awarded to Pakistan and the majority non-Muslim to India. The other assets that were divided included the British Indian Army, the Royal Indian Navy, the Royal Indian Air Force, the Indian Civil Service, the railways, and the Central Treasury. Self-governing independent Pakistan and India legally came into existence at midnight on 14 and the 15th of August 1947 respectively. The partition caused large-scale loss of life and an unprecedented migration between the two dominions. Among refugees that survived, it solidified the belief that safety lay among co-religionists. In the instance of Pakistan, it made palpable a hitherto only imagined refuge for the Muslims of British India. The migrations took place hastily and with little warning. It is thought that between 14 million and 18 million people moved, and perhaps more. Excess mortality during the period of the partition is usually estimated to be around 1 million. The violent nature of the partition created an atmosphere of hostility and suspicion between India and Pakistan that affects their relationship to this day. The term Partition of India does not cover the secession of Bangladesh from Pakistan in 1971, nor the separation of Burma, Myanmar, from the British Raj in 1937 or the much earlier separation of 4-page Ceylon, Sri Lanka, from the rule of the EIC in 1796. Other political entities or transformations in the region that were not a part of the partition were the political integration of princely states into the two new dominions, the annexation of the princely states of Hyderabad and Junagadh by India, the dispute and division of the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir between India, Pakistan, and later China, the incorporation of the enclaves of French India into India during the period 1947-1954, and the annexation of Goa and other districts of Portuguese India by India in 1961. Nepal and Bhutan, having signed treaties with the British designating them as independent states, were not a part of British-ruled India. The Himalayan kingdom of Sikkim was established as a princely state after the Anglo-Sikkimese Treaty of 1861, but its sovereignty had been left undefined. In 1947, Sikkim became an independent kingdom under the suzerainty of India. The Maldives became a protectorate of the British Crown in 1887 and gained its independence in 1965. Chapter 1 Summary. At the beginning of the book, the author has delineated the atmosphere and surroundings of his rented house in Delhi, which is owned by Mrs. Puri. She is the landlady, though a grandmother, soon proved herself to be a formidable woman. She was a Sikh from Lahore. Mrs. Puri was expelled from her old home during partition and in the upheavals of 1947 lost everything. She arrived in Delhi on a bullock cart. 42 years later she had made the transition from refugee pauper to Punjabi princess. She was now very rich indeed. She owned houses all over Delhi and had swapped her bullock for a fleet of new Maruti cars, the much coveted replacement for the old Hindustan ambassador. Mrs. Puri also controlled a variety of business interests. These included the Gloriana Finishing School, India's first etiquette college, a unique institution which taught village girls how to use knives and forks, apply lipstick and make polite conversation about the weather. The writer has elucidated about Mrs. Puri and her home in the following way. The flat perched at the top of the house, little more than a lean-to riveted to Mrs. Puri's ceiling. The stairwell exuded sticky, airless September heat, the roof was as thin as corrugated iron. Inside we were greeted by a scene from Great Expectations, a thick pall of dust on every surface, a family of sparrows nesting in the blinds and a fleece of old cobwebs, great arbors of spider silk, arching the corner walls. Mrs. Puri stood at the doorway, a small, bent figure in a salwar kameez. The last tenant did not go out much, she said, prodding the cobwebs with her walking stick. She added, he was not a tidy gentleman. Olivia blew on a cupboard, the dust was so thick you could sign your name in it. Moreover, the writer said that Mrs. Puri had achieved all this through a combination of hard work and good old-fashioned thrift. In the heat of summer she rarely put on the air conditioning. In winter she allowed herself the electric fire for only an hour a day. She recycled the newspapers we threw out, and returning from parties late at night we could see her still sitting up, silhouetted against the window, knitting sweaters for export. Sleep is silver, she would say in explanation, but money is gold. 5-page besides, William Dalrymple depicts about Mrs. Puri's husband in the following manner. Old Mr. Puri, her husband, was a magnificent-looking Sikh gentleman with a long white beard and a tin Zimmer frame with wheels on the bottom. He always seemed friendly enough. As we passed he would nod politely from his armchair. But when we first took the flat Mrs. Puri drew us aside and warned us that her husband had never been, well, quite the same since the riots that followed Mrs. Gandhi's death in 1984. In addition, the author portrays how Mr. Puri was traumatized by the 1984 Sikh riot. From that day on, however, the old man had become a fervent Sikh nationalist. Everyone should have their own home, he would snort. The Muslims have Pakistan, the Hindus have Hindustan, the Punjab is our home. If I was a young man I would join Bind Ranwale and fight these Hindu dogs. It is talk only, Mrs. Puri would reply. Before I die I will see a free Khalistan. You are daydreaming only. How many years are left? The Punjab is my home. He may have been born in the Punjab, Mrs. Puri would say, turning to me, but now he could not go back to village life. He likes flush toilet and Star TV. Everybody likes flush toilet and Star TV. How can you leave these things once you have tasted such luxury? Since the riots, Mr. Puri had also become intermittently senile. One day he could be perfectly lucid, the next he might suffer from the strangest hallucinations. On these occasions conversations with him took on a somewhat surreal quality. Mr. Puri, up the stairs to my flat Mr. William. Get your bloody mules out of my room this minute. WD but Mr. Puri, I don't have any mules. Mr. Puri nonsense. How else could you get your trunks up the stairs? During our first month in the flat, however, Mr. Puri was on his best behavior. Apart from twice proposing marriage to my wife, he behaved with perfect decorum. Subsequently, the author remarks about a Sikh driver Mr. Balvinder Singh whom he met in Delhi for his journey. The Singh family also lost many beloved family members during Sikh riot. Dalrymple opines about him in the following words, yet Mr. Balvinder Singh is an individualist who believes in the importance of asserting himself. While circumstances may force him to defer to buses and lorries, he has never seen the necessity of giving way to the tinny new Maruti vans which, though taller than his ambassador, are not so heavily built. After all, Mr. Singh is a Kshatriya by caste, a warrior, and like his ancestors he is keen to show that he is afraid of nothing. He disdains such cowardly acts as looking in wing mirrors or using his indicators. His ambassador is his chariot, his klaxon his sword. Weaving into the oncoming traffic, playing chicken with the other taxis, Balvinder Singh is a Raja of the road. Furthermore, the writer mentions that though he likes Balvinder, his wife Olivia does not like him. 6. Pipe. Page. Although I am devoted to him, Olivia is quick to point out that Mr. Singh is in many ways an unattractive character, a Punjabi Sikh, he is the Essex man of the East. He chews the beetle juice out of the window, leaving a red, go, pawn, and spits fast, stripe along the car's right flank. He utters incoherent whoops of joy as he drives rickshaws onto the pavement or sends a herd of paper boys flying into a ditch. He leaps out of his taxi to urinate at traffic lights and scratches his groin as he talks. Like Essex man, he is a lecher. His eyes follow the saris up and down the Delhi avenues, plump Sikh girls riding side saddle on motorbikes are a particular distraction. Twice a week, when Olivia is not in the car, he of first to drive RNE to GB Road, the Delhi red light district. Just looking, he suggests. Delhi ladies very good, haven't. Chapter 2 Summary. G breasts like mangoes. In the second chapter of the book, the writer has narrated the horrible incident of riot through the eyes of Mrs. Puri. They were very jungly peoples. Them from coming in, Mrs. Puri. Not from good castes, so I told Laddu to lock the door and stop. Remembers, we could hear them talking about us. They said, these people are Sikhs, let us kill them. Then they began to throw some stones and broke all the glasses. We switched off the lights and pretended no one was at home. We thought we would be kill led, but first we wanted to kill some of them. You see, actually we are warrior caste. My blood was boiling and I very much wanted to give Kshatriyas from them good, but they were standing outside only. What could I do? Moreover, the writer has also quotation, quote, depicted the suffering of innocent Sikh human being in the below. The mob smashed every window in the house, burned the Puri's car and incinerated their son's motorbike. Then they attacked the front door. Luckily, Mr. Puri was on the other side. Leaning forward on his Zimmer frame, armed to the teeth, he fired 3 times through the door with his old revolver and the mob fled. As they did so, old Mr. Puri got Laddu to kick open the door, then fired the rest of the round after them. 3 hours later, cruising in his taxi, Balvinder Singh passed Green Park, an area not far from the medical institute, when he encountered another mob. They surrounded the taxi and pelted it with stones. Balvinder was unhurt, but his front windscreen was shattered. He swore a few choice Punjabi obscenities, then returned quickly to his taxi stand. The next day, despite growing unrest, Balvinder and his brothers decided to return to work. For an hour they sat on their charpoys looking nervously out onto the empty street. Before agreeing the moment had come to hide the cars and shut up the stand. At 11:05, they received a phone call. It warned them that the nearby Sujan Singh Park Gurdwara was burning and that a large lynch mob was closing in on them. Leaving everything, they hastily set off to their house across the Jumna, 12 cousins in a convoy of 3 taxis. Single quote. 7. Pipe. Page. Afterwards, the author tells the poignant story of a Sikh family in the following way. Once they shouted, "Send out the men and we won't harm them." A couple of doors opened. And some of our neighbors gave themselves up. They took them away. It was only later that we discovered they had taken them to the edge of the block, made them drink arrows and then set them alight. How did you manage to escape? I asked. Look, said Sandhu, and getting up from the charpoy he pulled back a drape which covered the top of one wall. Behind lay a tiny cubby hole filled with a metal trunk and 2 packing cases laid end to end. Ranjit, he indicated the son still lying in the corner. Ranjit and I hid in there for 3 days. But you couldn't possibly have fitted, I said. We managed, replied Sandhu. There was no other choice. Did they never think of looking behind the drapes? I asked. We scattered all our jewelry and valuables at the front of the house. Most of the mob were interested only in looting. They took the jewelry and forgot about us. Sandhu smiled. Once, one of their leaders, a local Congress politician, came inside and rebuked them. You are just looting, he said. You should be killing. He flicked back the drape and saw our attic but we had placed the cases and mattresses in front of us. He said, it is too small. Nobody can hide there. That was the worst moment. I whispered to Ranjit, do not be afraid. It will be a quick pain, then it will be over. And I told him that he was a Sikh and that he must be brave. I said, they have to kill you. When the moment comes, do not beg the. You were very lucky, I said. The writer has concluded the book in the below passage. Mohalas. M for your life. Single quote. Delhi had many failings, but I had never felt it was a violent city. In all the time I had spent in the dark quarters of the old walled city, I had never once felt threatened. There were no areas that I felt uneasy to visit after sunset. Instead, I had always found Delhi Walas, particularly the poor, remarkable for their gentleness and elaborate courtesy. Wherever we went, complete strange RS would invite Olivia and me to sit and talk and share a glass of tea with them. To one brought up on a diet of starchy English reserve, this habitual kindness of the Delhi was as touching as it was strange. Yet as Balvinder and Sandhu could witness, Walla, when provoked, the inhabitants of this mild town could rise up and commit acts of extreme brutality. Men would avert their eyes as next-door neighbors were burned alive or disemboweled. The same people who would invite you to share their last plate of food could, with equal spontaneity, lose control and run amok. Then, with equal ease they could return to their bazaars and shops, factories and offices and carry on as if nothing had happened. It was difficult to understand. Moreover, despite Delhi's historic reputation as the most cultured town in India, the city's history was punctuated with many such flashes of terrible, orgiastic violence. It was not just invaders who put the people of Delhi to the sword. During the Middle Ages and throughout the long Yule twilight, the town was continually rent with bloody riots, even small civil wars. Out of the first 12 sultans, only 2 died peacefully in their beds, the rest were killed, usually in a horrible manner. And almost always by their courtiers or sub-jects. Invaders like Timur the Lame were able to stormed the high walls of the city only because the inhabitants were already busy cutting each other's throats. The death toll from bizarre disputes such as the 18th riot could run century shoe sellers. NTO tens of thousands. The last great conflagration was partition. In the dying days of the British Raj, when the subcontinent was split into Muslim only Pakistan and Hindu 8. Pipe. PAGE. Majority India, 12 million people were made refugees. Hordes of non-Hindus, Muslims, IKHSN, fled their ancestral villages in Pakistan. India's displaced Muslims struck out in the opposite direction. It was the greatest migration the modern world had ever seen. Yet again Delhi was consigned to the flames. Following some of the RST rioting in its history, nearly half of its ancient Muslim population, the descendants of the people who had erected the Qutb Minar and lined the streets to cheer the great Mughal. Their place was Talk. Packed their bags and headed off to a new country. And by refugees from the western Punjab, among them Mr. and Mrs. Puri and Punjab Singh. Delhi was transformed from a small administrative capital of 900,000 people to a Punjabi-speaking metropolis half the size of London. Of the two peoples who had ruled Delhi during the previous 1,000 years, the British disappeared completely while the Indian Muslims were reduced to an impoverished minority. In the space of a few months, the face of the city was probably changed more radically than at any other time since the Muslims first came to India, a millennium before. The end.